everyone, it's Kelly here. Unfortunately, I have returned from my holidays, but not empty-handed. I did a little book shopping while I was on my trip, and I'm going to show you today all of the books that I purchased while I was away on my holiday. Now, if you can hear scratching or jingly bells in the background, it's Kat. So please enjoy or ignore as appropriate, however it's coming across to you. Now, when I go on holidays down the south coast of New South Wales, there is a town called Ulladulla that I love to shop in for books. Number one, there are 3 separate secondhand book spots where I find some gems for a very, very reasonable price. And also there is a fantastic shop there called, I think it's called Harbourside Books or Harper Books in Ulladulla. And it is a fabulous bookstore, independently owned. They also publish books, have a publishing arm as well. So I do like to support that business while I am on holidays, because I think independent bookstores are such a rare thing these days that it's really important to be supporting them whenever we can. So I always make sure to buy a couple of books from that store while I'm there. So I'll show you those ones first and get them out of the way to show you the 2 books that I bought from Harper Books. I'll put the correct name if I've made a mistake. So the first one I got is called Catch Us the Foxes by Nicola West. I had not heard about this book before. It's written by, I believe, an Australian author, or is at least set in Australia. And it's described as Twin Peaks meets The Dry, in a deliciously dark and twisted tale that unravels a small Australian country town. So we begin with a young journalist whose father is the chief of police in her town, and she is horrified to discover her best friend, the corpse of her best friend, and it's been mutilated. So it's a sort of a crime situation, and there are symbols that have been carved into the body. So it's sort of, her then wanting to solve this crime, especially given her connection with the person. And it's sort of, is there something bigger going on here, or is this an isolated incident sort of vibe going on? So I cannot wait to get to this one, Catch Us the Foxes by Nicola West. The other book I bought there was one I have been hearing a lot about, and it's called Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. McConaghy. And she wrote Migrations, which is a book I have not yet read, but also I've heard some really good things about. And this is all about a woman and I believe her twin sister. So the main character is called Inti, the sister's called Aggie, and they're leading a team to reintroduce wolves to an area of Scotland where they are no longer. And it's kind of how they interact with the community and safely do this job, but also kind of how they, need to kind of win people over, I believe, because there's a lot of opposition to this plan. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this one very, very soon. Then, okay, we're into our secondhand books. So there's a Salvation Army store there, which I call the Salvos, or the Sallies, as my grandma used to call it. There's also a Vinney's, a St. Vincent de Paul, the Catholic charity. And they both have really good book sections as part of their general kind of secondhand vibe. But there's also in Ulladulla a Lions Club book. And so it's books exclusively, and it's always very, very well organized, cash only, run by volunteers, etc. So it's a really good kind of trio of secondhand places to go to look for books. Now, as well as this, while I was there happened to be a sort of country fair, I guess you would call it, kind of just like stalls and so on. And one of those stalls was a secondhand book stall, and I was able to pick up a couple of books there as well. I can't remember which came from where. I do remember that the Vinnies didn't have as many books as I have previously gotten there. Sometimes I've come away with like a whole lot of books. I only ended up getting 2 there. But the Salvation Army store, the Salvos, was really good. And I ended up getting quite a few from the from that stall that I was telling about at the fair. So that was pretty good. I have quite the haul. So let me tell you about some of the books that I got. These 2 I can remember where I got them from. So this was from the Lions Club bookstore. And I, again, was a bit disappointed. I didn't get as, you know, it's always hit and miss when you are buying secondhand books. You never know what's going to be there and, you know, who's already raked over it and found all the gems. So I only ended up getting 2 books there. So the first one was called Pasteurs Gambit, Louis Pasteur, the Australasian Rabbit Plague, and a $10 million prize. I didn't know anything about this, but apparently, so we have a massive rabbit problem in Australia. Our rabbits are not native to Australia. They were introduced by the colonial settlers, etc., presumably for hunting or food. I don't know. But they decided to introduce them, and then, as rabbits do, they bred, and we now have a massive rabbit pest problem in a country where rabbits never were. So at when was this, at 1887? So it's been a problem for a long time. So the New South Wales, which is a state in Australia, it's where I live, the government advertised an international competition for a biological cure for the rabbit plague then ravaging the farms of Australia and New Zealand. The competition, with a prize equivalent to $10 million today, would attract 1,500 entries and generate a sensational episode in Australasian history that combines science, subterfuge, and scandal. And it all centres around Louis Pasteur, as in the milk guy, who was an entrant into this competition. His nephew was sent to bring this entry to Australia, and there was some scandal that went on as a result. I don't know anything about this, so I picked it up because it just sounded like an interesting story. The other book that I got from that same store was called The Last Lighthouse Keeper by John Cook with John Bauer. Oh, sorry, I don't believe I told you the author of this one. Sorry about that. It's Stephen Dando-Collins is the author of Pasteurs Gambit. But this one is by John Cook with John Bauer, The Last Lighthouse Keeper. And this is all about the final lighthouse keeper, as in, because now lighthouses are run automatically from a distance and are managed, I believe. But previously, as I'm sure you're all aware, people had to live there to run the lights and so on. So this is about a guy called John Cook. So this is actually by him. So he is one of the authors of this book. So it will be a memoir, which I would have known if I'd read the words a memoir and clocked them as I was looking at this front cover. It's a memoir of this man. So he's in Tasmania, and he is known as the Keeper of the Flame. And he's one of Australia's longest serving lighthouse keepers. So I'm going to learn a little bit about what it was like to live and work in a lighthouse. Then we go into the pile that is a mishmash of different places that I got them from, because I just can't separate them out in my mind. This one, I think I got this one at the sale, at the fair, and it's Jeanette Winterson's The Daylight Gate. And this is to do with witchcraft, and it's based sort of within the period where in England witch trials were going on. So it's about magic, superstition, conscience, and ruthless murder. So it sounds really interesting. Another book that I picked up at the fair is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I don't really know anything about this other than a lot of people are talking about it at the moment. I believe Adele recommended it as like magic to the brain. So I don't really know, but I know it is a sort of a self-help type of book. So I don't know much about it, but I saw it on the sale table and decided to pick it up. Another book I got, and I can't remember where I got this one, is The Diaries of Miles Franklin, which are edited by Paul Brunton. Miles Franklin is a well-known Australian author who is a woman. The name Miles, do not let the name Miles kind of tell you otherwise, but Miles Franklin, who wrote My Brilliant Career, which is a book that I've got on my TBR. Actually, I have read it before many years ago, but I would like to reread it. But yeah, so Miles Franklin is probably one of our early kind of feminist type writers, and I'm interested to learn more about her in a non-fiction sense as well from her diaries. I then have another non-fiction, or is it biography perhaps? Yeah, a biography of Isabella of France, the Rebel Queen, written by Kathryn Warner. I'm going to be honest with you, I mainly picked this up because of the gorgeous cover. And also I do like a bit of historic stuff when I'm reading, so I thought it might be interesting to read about the life of a queen. And she married Edward II in January 1308. So this is from a very long time ago. So that should be interesting because that's not a period I know a whole lot about. So it'll be an interesting read about a queen that lived at that time. This one I do remember where I got it from. It's Little Women, but it's the Penguin Threads edition. I've shown on this channel a couple of other Penguin Threads that I've got. I don't think I've got any to hand at my bookshelves that are right here. But these are the ones that have a sort of, it looks like an embroidery, and then when you look at the inside cover, it's like the back of an embroidery, which I think is just really cool. So I've got two other ones that I've purchased. One is Black Beauty and the other one is The Secret Garden. So I'm excited to be able to bring Little Women in on that as well. I'm not 100% sure that I've read Little Women. I think I had an abridged version when I was a kid, but I certainly haven't read this chunky one. So I am planning on reading it at some point, and when I saw this edition, I had to get it to match my other two Penguin Threads. Another book I picked up, and can't remember where, is Mirrors, Stories of Almost Everyone by Eduardo Galeano, and translated by Mark Fried or Fried. So this is a book about history, but it's smashing, as it says on the back, smashes the narrative of history and arranges the shards into a new pattern to reveal the past in radically altered form. From the Garden of Eden to 21st century cityscapes, we glimpse fragments in the lives of those who have been overlooked by traditional histories. The artists, the servants, the gods, and the visionaries, the black slaves who built the White House, and the women who were bartered for dynastic ends. Combining unimpeachably vast knowledge with irresistible fireside storytelling skills, Galeano's world history is completely unique, a groundbreaking, mind-changing mosaic made of lives lived on our sorry, sparkling planet. And if that doesn't interest you, then I don't know if we can be friends, because that just sounds like a really fascinating look into the other side of history, the untold stories of history. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I also picked up somewhere another copy of The Dry. I think I got this one at the Salvation Army store by Jane Harper. I already own this, but the edition I have is in the smaller format, and this is the large format that I prefer, so I thought I might as well pick that up. And the last one that I've got is called The Lace Reader by Brunonia Barry, which is Brunonia. I have never heard that first name before. Sounds interesting. Now this sounded interesting to me because this is about people who, so in the same way that you would read tea leaves or, you know, looking for patterns in that sort of way, this, the protagonist in this story comes from a family of Salem women who can read the future in the patterns of lace and have guarded a history of secrets for generations, which sounded really fascinating to me. I really do enjoy a witchy book. So like a sort of historical witchy book that's kind of a little bit about magic, but a little bit more kind of about women's history and sort of the persecution of women. So this just sounded like an interesting thing. I've not heard of that before. I don't know if it was really a thing, but it certainly sounds really fascinating. Well, that is it for the books that I acquired whilst on a holiday. There are a lot, but I do definitely go into these holidays looking for secondhand bargains because, as I said, Ulladulla has some really great stores where you can pick up books really cheaply, as well as supporting an independent bookstore. So I do love my book shopping whilst on holiday, and I think I've hauled a great deal. All right, well, thank you very much for sticking around and for hearing all about these books that I have acquired. Hopefully you've heard of something new. I just love the like serendipity of going into especially a secondhand bookstore and finding a gem you've never heard of. Like this one, I certainly hadn't heard of this one. I'm so many amazing books that I've never heard of and I would not seek out otherwise. So I just love that serendipity of book shopping and finding something you've never heard of that just sounds really, really fascinating. So let me know in the comments whether you have read any of these books and would recommend them. If there's something here that piqued your interest and you're going to go and seek it out now, I'd love to hear about that too. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye!